Hey everyone, welcome back to the 410th episode of the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And we have a lot to talk about on this week's show. We're going to be hearing about plans for the CSA Alliance, Connectivity Standards Alliance, to add a health and wellness standard effort. Plus, we're going to talk about the challenges of deploying Matter and moving things back and forth and what still needs a little bit of work. There's also a new report talking about how industrial IoT attacks are on the rise. We've got news from Mobile World Congress about massive IoT networks. We also have some sad news on the voice control front, an update from Arlo about its security camera plans, a cool crowdfunded project for battery-powered IoT devices, and what is going to become a symptom of the times, which is a company that is going to take a cut in valuation or possibly pursue a sale. This is an IoT company. We'll also hear from our sponsor, Influx Data, and our guest this week is Michelle Mandala Freeman, who is the head of marketing and member services at the CSA, talking about this new effort. But first, a message from another one of our sponsors. This week's sponsor is Silicon Labs. Silicon Labs, a leader in secure, intelligent wireless technology, has launched their 2023 Tech Talks schedule. This year's Tech Talks include dedicated technology series for Matter, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and LP-WANs in order to help you build the development skills needed to deliver cutting-edge IoT products. Join Silicon Labs experts and industry leaders for these one-hour virtual trainings created for developers by developers. You can tune in, ask questions, and accelerate your device development today by registering now at scilabs.com. Okay, Kevin. The Connectivity Standards Alliance, which we know formerly as the Zigbee Alliance, and which is in charge of the Matter Smart Home Interoperability Standard and the Zigbee Standard and an access control standard and some other stuff, has launched a new working group. And this working group is all about solving data interoperability and using data from smart home devices for health and wellness. This is not part of the Matter standard. This is its own brand new working group, kind of analogous to what CHIP was, the Connected Home over IP working group, those many years ago. So I don't want to step too much on the toes of our guest. She'll be answering our questions about what the heck this is, who's going to be involved, what's the timing. But I did want to give a little context for this because I think it's really relevant. Health and wellness has been a huge perceived market opportunity by tech companies forever. I mean, literally back in 2005, I was sitting there watching presentations from Intel on managing people in the home, and it makes sense. We're like, oh, we have all this amazing technology. Let's use it for something that is a real big, expensive problem, healthcare. And we've also seen things like HealthKit, which Apple launched all the way back in like 2013, 2014.
I think it was just before the first Apple Watch. So that sounds about right.
Yeah. And they were like, hey, stick all of your medical files here with us. We'll share it with doctors. And they also launched something called ResearchKit, and that did not go anywhere. HealthKit people use. Do you use HealthKit?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I used it to import my audiogram from the Mimi hearing test app so I could fine tune, for example, my AirPods, which I use as essentially over-the-counter hearing aid, so to speak.
So do you share that information with your doctor? Does your doctor want it?
My doctor doesn't want to know squat. Well, I used to show him all these graphs and charts. And
did he give you a sticker?
He didn't give me a sticker. He gave me a talking to. He's a tech guy, and he loves talking about tech and what's coming out, what's new. And I tell him what I can talk about, and I'll say, well, there's other stuff that I can't talk about, but I'll tell you next time. But when it comes to like showing him all the graphs of my ECGs and all the other fun data that I can capture in HealthKit, he's like, yeah, okay, whatever. I don't want to see that. So I basically stopped.
Yeah, my doctor did not want to see it either. They questioned the medical relevance. They questioned like
non-believers.
No, I think it's actually very legit. They're also like, how does that change my life? It doesn't. It changes maybe your life. I mean, ultimately, the person responsible for your health is you. The doctor can only do so
True.
much.
I think a lot of them feel like, if it's not an approved medical device, certified, et cetera, I don't really trust it. And I get that. And I don't expect them to keep up on which devices are and are not certified for personal use. So I think it's more of that. I think if I said, look, I did an ECG and here's what it showed, I'm concerned, he would probably say, well, let's do one here.
Yeah.
Instead of just importing from mine.
And that's going to be the case possibly forever. Okay, maybe not forever, but I really feel that's going to be the case for like the next 50 to 100 years. But in the wake of the pandemic, we got a big boost of actual home health monitoring, and a good reason. We had a couple of things happen. One, people were like, well, don't go to the doctor's office because, you might get sick. So there was a need for that. Two, we also changed some of the payment structures. So insurers and Medicare were reimbursing for home and remote monitoring in ways that hadn't been happening. Some of those reimbursements are changing. So it's unclear if we actually have changed the world or we just had a blip in the world. And the medical world is just such a morass of regulations and best practices. And it makes sense because, you're dealing with someone's health and human life, right? So you don't want to willy-nilly decide something. And if you're a doctor, you don't want to remotely diagnose someone and then be like, oh no, I screwed up. It makes sense.
It takes a long time for that industry, at least in the US, to change for those reasons.
And this is early days, and you'll hear Michelle say that a million times during the interview. But the idea is that you would pull some data from some elements in the smart home and tie that back into insurance companies, medical establishments, medical device makers. So it feels very amorphous. And I think that's kind of the intent right now. I think if they're like, please join us and tell us where you would like this to go, is kind of the stage they're at.
I'm kind of curious if this actually takes root and bears any fruit in the long run, because we just mentioned HealthKit, for example, which is Apple's implementation of capturing all of my medical data only from apps and devices that I allow it to, so you have some choice over that. And it's like, do they need a new standard for that? I mean, you could say the same thing about Matter, and they went all in with Matter too. So maybe there is hope, but I don't know.
If you could get like a HealthKit style standard, right? Mm-hmm. I think that could be really compelling. I mean, one of the things that like Michelle mentions fall detection, and like it is hard to do fall detection if you're not all in on the Apple ecosystem. And I know we can talk about people going down ski slopes and triggering fall detection, but it is a really compelling option that the Apple Watch offers.
Yep.
So if you could do something like that or tie in, elder care is such an important thing. So if you could tie in data like about this time, so-and-so made a pot of coffee every day, and you could see like habit changes over time, or if someone didn't get up in the morning, those are interesting bits of information.
No doubt.
So I'm excited by this. Huge grain of salt. Matter did take like 3.5 years, almost 4.
It was 2019, late
December
2019.
2019. And so we'll call it January 2023. That's 3 years.
It's
3 years to get there.
3 years and a month or two. Yeah. Yeah. This is a CSA working group, and Apple is a member of the CSA. So
yeah, the CSA did not name
who's on the group,
with the exception of the organizing member, which is the Center for Medical Interoperability. That is a nonprofit that is trying to do interoperability for medical devices. Ta-da! So we're going to keep an eye on this. Probably not as close of an eye as we kept on Matter because it's a little left fieldish. But again, this is one of the huge promising areas of IoT. So I'm all in for it. I do question, like, there's so many efforts right now. Amazon has a paid care kind of service. It feels like when we talked about Matter causing commoditization of devices, we talked about the need to build services on it and how the big companies were going to build services, and that's how they were going to monetize this. If we create more standards, it'll be interesting to see if those companies are still on board, simply because, no, they want to create their own standards based on their own systems.
Yep.
Give it a little eye roll there. All right.
Speaking of standards.
Yeah, let's talk about Matter. You knew we couldn't go long without talking about it.
No, we could not. And so The Verge actually just reviewed the TP-Link Tapo smart plug, which is Matter certified. And
it's one of three. There's a Miros one that we've talked about on the show, and then there's the Eve one. I'm going to say the Tapo and the Miros are most compatible or comparable. Comparable, that's the word I want to look. Because those are Matter from opening the box. Eve still is kind of a pain because you're updating some firmware.
Yeah. And I did that back in November, and it was frustrating. I mean, eventually
I did that in January, and it was
still frustrating.
Still frustrating. But Eve is now, like, by the end of March, I believe, or maybe it's even early March, their devices will be sold as Matter compatible. So they're just getting there.
They're just getting there. But the TP-Link and the Miros ones come, as you said, out of the box, Matter certified and ready to go. So no upgrades needed. And I reviewed this back on January 30th, and I had a little bit of frustration with it still. Not as much as an upgrade situation, but The Verge kind of, I guess they went through the same experience, because the review is like, it works, but, and they mentioned like three main points, which really apply, I would say, generally to Matter right now, the state of Matter. Android apps, you can't connect to an Apple Matter controller, like a HomePod or Apple TV. So it's frustrating. You have to use an iOS device. Right. And in fact, I used two devices, an iOS and an Android device, when I tested this, because I actually do meet the requirements there. I have the Apple Matter controller, but I couldn't get the device connected to it. So I used my Google Home ecosystem and an Android phone. So she's got a very good point there. There's no Android app for Apple Home, and I would never expect one. It won't be needed once Matter is fully out. And then the Amazon and Google Home apps on iOS, they can't add Matter devices to their respective platforms, meaning right now it's like an iOS only world from a controller standpoint.
Yeah. Now, if you don't start out with an iOS app on the device, it's a little bit better. Like, you can add the Tapo smart plug with a Google device and just get it working just fine on Google. And I'm trying to remember if it populates. I should take better notes.
The Eve was a problem because it was HomeKit only previously, so you still needed an Apple Matter controller.
So basically what was happening is JP was adding this to all of the platforms and trying to get it to work across all the platforms. And that is still difficult. And by all of the platforms, I mean Amazon, Apple, Google, and SmartThings. And this is going to be the case. Now, I don't know how many people are actually using all of those hubs in their homes. So there is that.
Right.
But
that's true.
If you're doing, I wish I knew what the most common, is it Amazon and Google?
It's probably Amazon, I would think.
HomeKit?
That's probably a fair point. I would say yes. And then Google.
So when you had the TP-Link Tapo plug, you uploaded it via the Apple Home. And so I'm going to ask you, I'm assigning you homework, Kevin. Go see if it populates easily and let us know on Amazon. Because I know somewhere in a basement you have a Madam A device running around.
I do. I will have to check that. And yes, theoretically it should work, but it's worth verifying. It certainly did on my Google Home devices.
Yeah. And when I used it and put it on my Android device, it did populate over to SmartThings. But I think it did that because SmartThings and Google worked out some sort of deal. And SmartThings has that same sort of integration deal with Madam A as well. This is all very complicated. And that's the moral of this story.
Exactly. It's not where it needs to be yet. It will be. I firmly believe that. But it's not there yet.
So keep waiting. And in a couple of weeks, we'll have Paulus Schautzen, who is the founder of Home Assistant. And he's talking, he talks in the interview about his thoughts on Matter and the state of it and kind of when we can expect it to be a little bit more seamless. So yay. The answer is not anytime soon. Just in case. I'll spoiler alert. It's not soon. Okay. Let's talk about something else that is new. leading into Mobile World Congress that is happening at the end of February, first week of March in Barcelona. Yay. We've got some cool, I guess, updates on massive IoT. And massive IoT is, I feel like Ericsson tries to make this a thing. Some other telcos have tried to make this a thing. It's basically like hundreds of thousands to millions of sensors that are deployed. It's a lot. And we're talking low data rates. We're talking battery powered. We're talking, state information. This is not like a camera kind of situation. And they could be everywhere. And the key here is it needs to be easy to deploy and easy to maintain. So that's where the no batteries come in. The easy to deploy is good software and the ability just to let these things connect onto the network without requiring a lot of authentication. It's like barcode. Yes. Barcode. Next one. So Wirepass, which is a Finnish company, they are showing off their first implementation of non-cellular 5G for massive IoT. By non-cellular 5G, this basically means they're going to be able to connect a lot of devices using a 5G standard that is certified by not the GSM, which does all the cellular standards, but by the ITU, which is the International Telecommunications Union?
I think it's the Union.
I think it's Union. So just so you know, because I'm like, when I say 5G, almost all of us are going to think cellular. This is non-cellular 5G. And apparently the ITU can certify things as 5G as well. Big shrug on that front. Their standard is DECT 2020. DECT is familiar to those of us who are old because...
That would be me. I remember when we had landlines, the cool new thing was you'd get a landline base station and you'd have a wireless handset with a big old antenna. I think back then it used 900 megahertz spectrum, and you could walk around your house or outside and talk on the phone. And DECT improved that service, and there's been at least 6 iterations of DECT.
Yeah. So this is like DECT for a new era. And this DECT is for IoT. And basically, we've talked about this. It's using the unlicensed frequency band at 1.9 gigahertz. It's available around the world. And they're using a Nordic chip to show this off. So exciting there. And we'll see. I like this because I've talked to the folks at Wirepass about their standard, and they can fit a lot of radios in a square meter. And it's pretty dense networks, which you don't always need. But if you're thinking of the IoT being everywhere and sensors being on every single item in a warehouse or something, you would need something to that capability. So,
yay, smart cities.
Smart cities are another use case. So they're going to show this off. If you're at Mobile World Congress, go look at it and then come tell me what you think. Because I think it sounds really good and really compelling, but, I am not deploying networks on the regular. All right. Next up, security news. I do think it's getting better, but we're still
not quite yet.
We're still in that era where all the things we're doing to make things better are still all the old stuff is still around. So Dragos, which is an industrial IoT security company, they put out a report. There's always these reports. And this particular report says that they've seen that these industrial ICS, industrial control systems, that's it. There are too many acronyms in the IoT.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of protocols used by ICS systems as well that are all acronyms.
Yeah, those are ICS. This is basically the OT gear, the operational technology that we talk about when we're oh no, it's the stuff that's operating your power plants, your water treatment plants, your industrial manufacturing equipment. Anyhow, Dragos has been tracking a bunch of different threat groups. They're saying that, yes, threats are on the rise still. They found some new malware that targets industrial control systems, and it was developed, they believe, by a state actor. State actors are the worst. This means governments or units of armies. I was or units of governments have developed this to go after other countries. So this is cyber warfare. This is what we're seeing. China is doing some things like this with Taiwan. We're seeing Russia do it with companies in Ukraine. We did it to Iran.
And the list goes on.
It really does. So this report is basically saying that we've got more threat actors on the stage and there's more malware. And it mostly so far has been targeting the oil and gas industry, this new threat actor that they're talking about. And if you click through the link that we're going to include in our show notes, you can get a deep dive into pretty much all of the groups that they're following that are deploying malware for industrial control systems. Some of them very scary, some of them only slightly scary, but it's still a big deal. There's still the number of vulnerabilities specific to industrial control systems hardware has been up 27% from 2021 going into 2022. And about 85% of those were deep inside ICS networks, which is tough because companies don't necessarily know when they've been compromised if they're not.
Until all the lights go out.
Yeah. They also noticed that almost a third of the advisories that were issued didn't have a patch, and 60% had no practical mitigation. What that means is you just shut that equipment down, or you take it off the network. So you try to isolate it as much as you can. They also found that a lot of industrial companies don't know what they have, which,
you
should get on that. So that's that. Okay, so more information there if you are interested. Let's talk about voice, because there's some sad news in the open source voice front. I missed this when they published it, but yeah, so basically the company behind Mycroft, which is an open source
voice assistant service.
It was the software. They were going to produce hardware. They had a Kickstarter campaign for it. They shut it down. They can't do it. And that's sad.
It is sad. I mean, they delivered their Mark I prototype back in 2017. They started up an Indiegogo for it in 2015. That was actually like a prototype, as they call it, where you could, basically have your own open source smart speaker, or voice assistant, I guess is probably the better word than smart speaker. And then this was a more refined product, the Mark II. And they were planning on delivering it December 2018.
Yeah.
And then they've had all kinds of hardware challenges to begin with. It's a shame because the device itself looks really nice.
It looks so cute.
Yeah. The prototype was prototype-ish looking. I mean, it was just a Raspberry Pi and a housing and a bunch of ports and the software. But now they went to, a much more performant processor, more RAM, 2 speakers, 2 mics, a camera, touchscreen. It was nice. And at this point, it's not happening. And it's not just the hardware part that really is upsetting to me. Having an open source alternative to other voice platforms is really kind of the bummer to me.
Yeah. So the downside here is, so Mycroft was having a hard time, and we're going to see this a lot. We're going to see companies that were flushed and excited during the boom times start to realize they can't raise more capital. I know this was an open source project, so it's a little bit different, but they can't raise more capital and they don't have a path to sustainable business. And so we're going to see them shut down. In this case, it was, chip shortages. A lot of things kind of came in to halt the development of their hardware and make it crazy expensive.
At least the source code, the repository is still available and will continue to be available on GitHub. So if anybody wants to run with it, they can do that. I could see some people try. I don't think anything big will come of it, but if you want your own personal voice assistant that's you have total control over and you have the knowledge and skills, you could do it.
Yeah. And they're basically saying that if you ordered the device from their website, they're going to fulfill it. If you ordered it from Kickstarter, you're not going to get it. And people paid quite a bit. How much did they pay?
$199 was the lowest price for backers to get one of these devices.
So it looks like they're not going to get a refund?
Yeah, if they've gone through Kickstarter, I don't think so. And that is a risk with any Kickstarter program. They're saying they will be shipping all orders, as you said, made through the Mycroft site, because those sales directly cover the cost of producing and shipping. But they don't have the funds to continue fulfilling rewards from the crowdfunding campaign, or to continue meaningful operations. So they really don't say, which tells me you may be out of luck on your money if you went through Kickstarter.
Yeah. And people are rightly upset about it and rightly frustrated with Kickstarter. So, yeah.
Yeah.
And apparently people are really upset because it looks like there's still some for sale on the website, but they're just dumping the backers.
Mm-hmm.
So not a good look, but it's a look we're probably going to see more of.
If you go on the website, they're selling for $499 each because you would have paid a lot less on Kickstarter as an early backer. And some people are complaining, saying ethically and morally, you should be sending those to backers, which that's a good point.
Yeah. I mean, they're still shutting down the entire company. So I don't know if you'd really want to spend that much money on hardware from a company that's going out of business.
Well,
but you would want a refund.
I mean, you still have the software available as open source. I mean, yes, if something breaks on the hardware, sure, you're definitely out of luck there. But it's also fairly standard basic hardware.
Yeah. I mean, it's a Pi, isn't it?
No, it's more than it's got a Cortex A72 in it.
Oh,
so it's,
okay.
So it's more like a low end smartphone chip from a couple years ago, which is more than enough for this product. Yes. But
right.
Yeah.
All right. Maybe this is a happier consumer story, so keep your Mycroft backlash going. The CEO of Arlo has said that they are going to reverse course to apply a retroactive end-of-life policy to its security cameras. They're going to extend that end-of-life date for the older cameras to 2025. Yay! You're also going to get security updates to those cameras until 2026, and they're not going to remove the free video storage for existing customers. So there's a 7 days of free videos. And I have the cameras that were affected by this. So this is nice. They were going to have this all happen in January of 2023. And it was going to kill the 7-day free cloud storage, which is why a lot of people bought those cameras.
Exactly.
A big reason is, I know I bought my cameras forever ago. So I guess I was like, okay, I guess cameras live this long in the IoT. It's good to have a date. But Arlo switched its business model to really focus on getting subscribers to its cloud service. So they make the hardware, but the real money is going to be in keeping people subscribed to its cloud software or cloud video recording service. It doesn't give details on the specific models that are going to be still working through the end of 2025 instead of the end of 2024?
I would imagine this is a blanket kind of statement that they're going to cover whatever they said they weren't going to cover, and they had listed that out previously. So
yeah, I'm waiting for my email, basically.
Yeah.
That's the next step here. And this is it's a cautionary tale, but it's also kind of good news. Like, oh, they were going to screw a bunch of customers. And then the customers said, no, don't do that. And they were like, oh, okay. And probably because my hunch is customers who had the old stuff, the Arlo gear was actually really good. Like, I really liked those cameras. They worked very well and they were very expensive. They probably went out and bought more gear. And then you probably don't want to alienate all those people, some of whom might be subscribers with some of their other cameras.
And you probably don't want a class action that said, hey, this product was advertised as having this service for free. And
then you took it away from us.
You took it away.
Yeah. And it's
probably cheaper to keep the cloud service going than do that.
Part of me wants something to have a lawsuit on this or the FTC to step in.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Well, the reason is because then it would create like some sort of expectation. And we kind of need that here. We don't have anything. So other news. This is a crowd supply. So it's like a Kickstarter, only it's on crowd supply. But this is super nerdy.
And you can't even back it yet.
This is coming
so don't worry.
soon.
Put your wallet away.
We're just going to mention it very briefly.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's pronounced Riot or what was it? You were saying Riot?
Riot, Riotee.
Yeah. I like the Riot. Ta-da. And this is going to combine a microcontroller with a Bluetooth radio and a solar panel. And yeah.
Like a really small solar panel. This is basically a Raspberry Pi RP2040 sized board. It's small.
It's tiny.
It's tiny, exactly. So you're going to have small solar panels. But I mean, you're also not going to run something that's power hungry off of this.
Right. And this is a sensor. This is like, stick this sucker in a field and it will tell you something, maybe once an hour, maybe.
Yeah. It's got an accelerometer, temperature, humidity sensor, microphone. These are all on the sensor shield that you would attach to this thing.
Yeah. And there's the solar shield that you use to power it. And yeah, it just looks like a neat little project. We don't know how much it's going to be, but.
And it's open source. That's key to me.
Yeah.
In fact, it uses Arduino-based software. And didn't somebody just take an Arduino class?
I did. Oh my gosh. I could use it. I could make this work. And they have a lovely comparison chart that compares it to like the Wiliot Pixel and the Everactive Eversensor, which, by the way, in a week or two, you'll get a review because I've been playing with that, and an Ocean sensor, powered sensor. So I'm kind of really excited about this. I can't wait. They think that it'll let you communicate over 100 meters, but that is just an estimate. Again, super tiny. And I don't know, maybe we'll play with this. We'll definitely let you know when it goes on sale. All right. Speaking of things that might be on sale, Tonal, the smart weight. It competes
with resistance type of weight training product that you hang on a wall, and the computer and the sensors inside can adjust the resistance based on your program you're running or how you're actually doing during an exercise. Like if you're struggling, it can reduce it automatically so you're not pushing as much weight around.
Yeah, and you tell it your goals, and then it creates kind of programs for you. It also, you could do coaches, I believe, through this as well, like classes that you can do, much like Peloton has.
It's also $4,000.
Yeah, it's expensive. So during the pandemic, everyone was like, holy cow, Peloton. There was a company called Mirror that did something very similar. Tonal, everybody's like, oh, put money in this. Everyone needs a really high-end gym at home because no one's going to gyms anymore and they never will again. Apparently, people do want to go to the gym because they're going back to the gym, and Tonal is, and Peloton is also, they were also challenged. Mm-hmm. Tonal actually apparently had sales talks, according to Bloomberg, with Peloton, and nothing happened. They had hired bankers to see what they could do. Could they sell this company? They're basically now saying they're willing to have a valuation cut that would value the company is like looking for funding that would value it a third of its original $2 billion valuation, almost $2 billion valuation.
That's never a good thing.
Yeah. They're also going to get a new CEO.
It's the Peloton situation all over again, quite honestly.
It is, but Peloton actually made it to the public markets and Tonal hasn't. So
right.
Peloton paid off their investors. Yay for the investors. Mm-hmm. The venture investors. Not the investors in the stock.
Not the common man.
So Bloomberg says that Tonal was on track to generate more than $100 million in subscription sales in the next year. That's just like recurring subscriptions. That's not the hardware.
Right.
Which that certainly doesn't, to me, justify a $1.9 billion valuation, but
no.
But I'm kind of conservative with my money. Mirror actually sold to Lululemon for $500 million in 2020. So they sold before the pandemic. And
you can now get one of those mirrors, which is a similar product. It's more of a mirror/screen where you can see what you're supposed to do for your workout. It was $1,500, and now I think it's like about half the price if you want one.
So IoT fitness, maybe not the place to be, but we are still seeing products launch. We've seen some multi-$1,000 Pilates reformers with sensors on it. Mm-hmm. We've got a smart yoga mat is running around somewhere.
And hey, if these guys stay afloat, all of these companies, then, that new health and wellness working group might have somebody to work with.
Yeah, that's exactly. Full circle right there. Nice job, Kevin. This is exactly the sort of data you want to share across different platforms. I agree. Okay. Well, that concludes the news segment of the show, but let's go to the Internet of Things podcast hotline. This is the segment of the show where we hear from you, our listeners, and it is sponsored by Akenza. Create amazing IoT solutions with the Akenza low-code IoT platform. You can try it for free today at akenza.io. That's AKENZA.io. Go check that out. It's free and it's actually kind of fun. I went and I was like, ooh, neat.
Plus, you just like to say Akenza.
Akenza is fun to say. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm a big fan of any no and low code platforms because I am a no and low code. A no code coder? How would I don't code.
She's a no coder.
I'm a no coder. So those are always fun where I can just kind of do things without knowing things. Okay. If you would like to ask us questions, Kevin actually does know how to code, so he can help there. But if you would like to ask us questions, hopefully about the smart home or IoT, industriality, whatever, give us a call at 512-623-7424, and we might answer your question on the show. But even if we don't, you will be entered to win this month's prize. And February's prize is the Samsung SmartThings Station. So this is a SmartThings hub, the Matter compliant hub. Will charge your Galaxy devices if you have a Galaxy device, and it's got a button you can press to make programs and
to make things happen in a low code way.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's kind of a neat device. I could try it.
Yeah.
Okay. This week, our question comes from Keith. Let's hear it.
Yes. Hi, this is Keith calling from North Carolina. I was wondering if after several years of adding and taking away items from your Wi-Fi router, and I have everything from hubs to switches and light bulbs and security systems and so on and so forth, if the system should be redone, if that makes any sense, as far as maybe shutting everything down, disconnecting everything, very similar to getting a new router. Would that help your system be faster? Because I know over the years I have taken things off but not really deleted them from the system, so on and so forth. I am thinking about going ahead and moving up to 6, and I believe you have stated in the past that would be a good move to make. But I was wondering if I would gain anything by just keeping the router that I currently have. I have a mesh router, and possibly just starting it back from the get-go. I appreciate your help, and I have thoroughly enjoyed your shows over the years. Thank you.
So we get a lot of questions about router upgrades, and we do cover and test a lot of the latest routers. We've done a bunch of the 6Es, and we did the Wi-Fi 6s when they came out. A couple things come to mind with Keith's question. Right off the bat, one of the main reasons that I would recommend a router upgrade for anybody would be if they have a router that doesn't take full advantage of their broadband speeds from their ISP. You don't need to upgrade your router if you're only getting, say, 50 megabits per second to your home, because all of the routers, even from 6-7 years ago, can handle that. So that's the first thing I would do. I just don't want to see you spend money, anybody spend money that they're really not going to get any benefit from. As far as removing hub switches, light bulbs, and all that, I mean, really, just a router reboot is all you probably need to do, because the router is kind of agnostic. It's just sending data from your devices to other devices or to the internet. There's no cruft in there or bloat or anything from your smart home devices. They're either internet activated and connected devices or they're not. So I don't think you need to remove them all from your network and re-add them all. I don't think you're going to gain anything there.
But
if you do want to do that, and or you do want to get a new router, use the same network ID that you use when you set up all those devices the first time, because that will save you a ton of time. You won't have to type in the network ID and your Wi-Fi password if you don't change those. You can change your hardware, but keep those.
Keep your SSID and your password the same.
Exactly.
Unless it's been compromised. And then you're in for a world of hurt depending on how many IoT devices you have. But
yeah, because just each one's got to get done individually. Correct.
If you have cruft, I'll tell you where the cruft lives.
Where's the cruft?
The cruft lives on your hubs.
Yes.
I've moved a lot recently, like every 2 to 3 years. So I've had a really good excuse to do this. But I kind of do think a best practice is probably every 2 to 3 years. which is about when you should update your router anyway, just reset your entire smart home. Reassess where everything is. Go back to a hardware reset on your devices, re-add them. Think about, does this even make sense for how you're living now? Because, every 2 to 3 years, your children might get older. They might leave the home. Your schedule, your job, all of these things might change. 3 years ago, we were we were not yet in a lockdown, but a lot changed then. We added a whole bunch of work from home type of devices. Maybe we bought a Peloton. All of those things could have happened. And now maybe you've sold your Peloton because you're back at the gym now. And you want to get all of that off those hubs. It's going to take time. I advocate spending a whole day on this or a weekend, but it is worth it. You'll find your stuff is a lot cleaner. And I'm hoping actually Matter in a year or two will help with this process, just do a full-on reboot of the smart home, but I'm not too optimistic.
Yeah. And that's actually a good time to change your passwords as well.
Yeah. If you're going to do that, then change your password. Because, again, if your kid has not been religious about giving the guest network to their friends, maybe you don't want a 20-year-old now that's not very smart having access to your network.
Our kid didn't know we had a guest network, so our regular network was used quite often without my okay, but whatever. That's a good point. The other point to make here is that upgrading your router, I'm assuming you have Wi-Fi 5. I'm taking a guess here because you said, you're thinking about moving up to 6. So whether it's 6 or 6E, it's not going to really help your smart home devices that much because the new standards are really for moving big swaths of data much quicker. So video streaming, for example. So
whenever I say that, someone inevitably comes back to me and is like, Stacey, it will help. And it'll help because
it takes...
No. There's actually some broadcast improvements that mean it requires less power to send data around.
That's true. And it could free up the 2.4 and the 5 gigahertz spectrum for non-Wi-Fi 6 and 6E devices, such as your smart home devices. So they're not competing as much with your TV or your tablets and all that. So yes, I'll call that an indirect benefit. I'll rephrase this and say there's no direct benefit to doing so.
All right. So, go out there, grab a new Wi-Fi 6 router, maybe do a hard reset on whatever your smart home hub is. Add stuff back because you'll see a lot of cruft in there, and that should help with latency.
Mm-hmm.
And while you're at it, update everything. If you've been passing on those updates, update it. Okay, that's it for the IoT hotline. If you want to give us a call, you can reach us at 512-623-7424, and you'll be entered to win a Samsung SmartThings station. And now stay tuned for our guest, Michelle Mandela Freeman, who is the head of marketing for the CSA. We're going to be talking about that new health and wellness working group that they've got. But first, a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Influx Data. Hey everyone, we are taking a quick break from the Internet of Things podcast for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is InfluxDB, and I have Brian Mullen, the Chief Marketing Officer at InfluxDB, here to talk to us about the database and customers, including Tesla. Brian, what is InfluxDB?
InfluxDB is a platform for developers to handle time series data at scale. To give you an idea what time series data is, it's really just data that is stamped in time in some way. And that could be hours or minutes or seconds or even nanoseconds. Handling this type of data is pretty difficult and time consuming, and InfluxDB makes it simple and fast. And so developers can ingest, store, and analyze all types of time series data. And that covers metrics, events, and traces. And they can do it all on a platform that is designed to handle the high speed and high volume data ingest and real-time analysis. And InfluxDB itself consists of our core database and storage engine, the API, and a surrounding ecosystem of tools and integrations to ingest, query, and analyze that time series data.
Sweet. So why does a purposely built time series platform matter to IoT folks?
Today, pretty much all IoT data is time series data. It's generated by sensors, systems, and applications that change over time and are, therefore time-stamped in some way. And so as companies build new IoT systems and applications, the developers themselves working on those just have to keep up with the data, which is growing exponentially. The sources of data in IoT are everywhere. I mean, it could be sensors on a wind turbine, solar panels on a roof, temperature gauges in smart agriculture field, or even sensors and gauges in a connected car, like the ones we drive every day. And these sources are producing data, things like temperature and usage and battery life, location, speed, engine efficiency. Now multiply all of that by the time intervals, and that's a lot of data.
What are some of the challenges associated with this amount of data?
First is, pure volume. It's a massive workload of data, exponentially larger than is typical. And second, for a typical database, whether it's relational or document, laboring through so many of these reads and writes really impacts performance. The ingest is slow and the query is even slower. The long-term retention and access becomes really difficult. So if you have tons of very recent or hot data alongside a longer history of older, important, but slightly less relevant cold data, how do you manage both? These are the hard technical challenges that most incumbent DBs are just not able to handle. And so where other DBs and tools fade, InfluxDB really shines. Solving these time series challenges is why InfluxDB exists.
So can you tell me a little bit about how your customers are using InfluxDB?
Yes. So let's look at an example. Let's start with Tesla. Tesla is a leader in smart home energy. Their home power walls pull time series data from the unit that's mounted in each user's home. And that's emitting things like power level, usage, and some other metrics all throughout the day, taken at regular intervals. And they use InfluxDB to collect and analyze this time series data.
All right. And where can our listeners go to find out more about InfluxDB?
The best thing to do is to try the product, and you can do that by going to our website at influxdata.com.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Michelle Mandela Freeman, who is the head of marketing and member services at the Connectivity Standards Alliance. Hi, Michelle. How are you today?
Hey, Stacey. I am fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
I am really excited. So y'all may be familiar with Michelle because she was one of the primary voices on Matter and the Connectivity Standards Alliance. Y'all are totally familiar with because we talk about them all the time when we talk about Matter, the smart home interoperability standard. But now y'all have something new up your sleeve. So what is it?
Yes, we do. We have just recently announced a new working group within the Connectivity Standards Alliance called the Health and Wellness Working Group. Very similar to some of the origin story that you have heard about Matter, there had been some efforts among a number of executives through some of our thought leadership events to explore new areas where we might find standardization will help grow markets, improve value to consumers, and generally help the IoT industry thrive. And this area of health and wellness really has bubbled to the top in the recent past as an area that deserves attention and exploration.
So it sounds like this is way back in the day when the Matter Working Group launched. It was the Connected Home over IP Working Group with the awesome CHIP acronym. This doesn't sound like it has a similar awesome potential acronym, but this is how I should think of this. This is its own thing. It's not going to be part of Matter.
That's correct. We are definitely early days, which means we're bringing people together. And this is a distinct working group from the Matter Working Group.
What are the goals? Like, what are the inputs that we're looking at here? Who are the people that you're trying to get involved?
Right. So I think the goals of the group are to solve some of the interoperability challenges that we currently see across the full ecosystem of health and wellness. So not just interoperability between devices like you see with Matter, but interoperability and sharing and the way data is used and leveraged throughout that end-to-end ecosystem. So when we think about the kinds of companies we would like involved in this, it's everything from device manufacturers and in particular medical device manufacturers to folks who are integrating and providing services in the home for medical devices in the home, to payees and service providers and healthcare providers, and even areas such as retail and retail pharmacy, where people can buy today connected devices for health off the shelf.
So can you give me a use case? Because obviously that was a huge range of potential groups working on this. And I feel like there's already groups to standardize, electronic health records. There have been other efforts in this space. So give me a use case where it seems like the CSA would be able to add value through, I don't know if it's device sensors or what.
Right. So what we are focused on is tackling some of those use cases that may leverage devices that you have in your home today, but may also start to bring in some of the more specialized kind of health and wellness devices. The places that we're starting right now are things like aging in place. A good example of a use case is mobility and fall risks. I didn't realize this until we started this process, but 1 out of 4 people over the age of 65 fall every year. But like less than half of those people actually report to a doctor or a friend or a family that they fell. Once you fall once, the chances that you're going to fall again are like 2x. This is a really interesting use case, especially as we think about like our own friends and family, the aging population. How can we, as an alliance and as a community, who have members, again, spanning from silicon to storefront, get together and say, how do we make this system work? How do we make it so that information about these folks in their homes today is more accessible, is more usable, provides more visibility and transparency? So a lot of the same things that we talked about as the benefits of bringing the community together to build Matter, to solve interoperability, we're looking at those same kinds of things here. And we're doing that kind of just in the context of a different marketplace and a different set of use cases.
I will tell you right now, I am almost 45 and I fall on the regular.
Oh my.
I'm a Victorian swooner, as I like to say. I just down all the time. That brings up this idea because we have a lot of options. As a swooner, I can tell you I could be in the Apple ecosystem and I would have an Apple Watch that would tell me this. Amazon has its own care service that has a sensor that tracks for falls. These are your existing Matter members, and they're power Matter members, I would say, because they're already building their own closed ecosystems around health and wellness. Do you see them participating, or how do you see this kind of playing out with the existing other smart home ecosystem that the CSA manages?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I think that from the vantage point of the Alliance, again, very similar to the world of Matter, there is benefit. There is benefit to the manufacturing community, benefit to the ecosystems, benefit to consumers to going down a more standardized path. We hope that we will be leveraging Matter as part of the work that goes on with this working group. And then we hope to build on that to create some additional consistency in data model definitions, potentially in kind of how, data is collected and used, et cetera. We see, again, that all the players should be interested in creating a more accessible, interoperable space for consumers in this area.
I hope so, because truly it would make my life much easier. All right. Because this is health and wellness, because this is looking at things like aging in place, which is in your home, how do y'all think you will handle privacy issues? Because Matter has done a bang-up job, I think, on security. I also think the health and wellness area really could use extra security. So I think that's a great additive thing there. But privacy is going to be so key here. What are y'all thinking?
Yes, we completely agree, right? We've talked a lot about how security is really foundational to consumer acceptance and adoption of IoT, and you're 100% correct. Privacy is at that same level in terms of consumer needs. We do expect that we will be needing to focus in on areas like consent and authorization, security and privacy. These are things that the working group is going to have to map out and address, both in terms of use cases and in terms of the standards along the way. It's a bit early days to kind of go deeply into specifics, but what I can tell you is it's definitely top of mind. We also recognized that there will be likely a lot of regulatory input around this area as well. So part of the working group is going to be honing in on how do we engage with governments, with regulators, both with respect to data privacy and in general with respect to the specific topical area of health and wellness.
And that's actually a great point, because I was surprised to learn that HIPAA doesn't actually do what I thought it did. It only governs the medical data that my health insurance company has, that my doctors share out with payers. And so once I move my data into another platform like HealthKit or something, Apple doesn't actually have to deal with my HIPAA. I'm sure Apple would love to because they really are marketing hard on that privacy-centric thing. But when I look at what consumers understand about their medical and health data and what's actually reality, do you think there's room here for your health and wellness group to really kind of push the envelope on privacy standards for regulators or for members of the group?
I think I'll talk about that a little bit more broadly than just health and wellness, right? I think the Alliance generally recognizes that this whole issue of data privacy is a challenging area for regulators and for consumers, and frankly, for all the players in the ecosystem. The way I like to think about this is that we're really focused. We should be focused on a handful of things. There are basically three things that we believe need attention and focus in this area. One is transparency, and the second is accuracy, and the third is choice. So how can we be more clear with consumers, especially critical here in the health and wellness space, with what is being captured, what is being used, where is it being used? Accuracy. Can we help as an alliance? Can we help as an organization to make it more clear and to validate that what players in the ecosystem say is happening to data is actually happening? So that kind of accuracy and verifiability. And that third component is choice. You and I may have different views about what we do or do not wish to share and under what circumstances. So this is, I think, kind of the conundrum of data privacy, that we each have our own personal views of what good looks like for us. I think this group, health and wellness in particular, and the Alliance in general, when it comes to data privacy, is really kind of honed in on those three areas.
Those are good areas. And I wish you a lot of luck on that. That is going to be so hard because I think one of the things we don't think about often, because it's complicated when it comes to the Internet of Things, is that my open close sensor on a door can say, hey, the door is open or closed. But then over time, as algorithms get better or new research comes out, that same sensor could communicate something completely different later on to a different app, or maybe that sensor gets used in conjunction with another sensor. And then suddenly it can tell if I'm healthy, not just if my door is open or closed. And I'm thinking about like putting it on a bathroom door. That apparently is a great indicator of health. So that's going to be hard. We'll talk about it. When will we talk about it, Michelle? Let's find out what the time frame is, because Matter, y'all came out, pre-pandemic, all the credit in the world, probably thinking this was going to be a smaller thing than it ended up being. But y'all were like, yeah, we got it. We're going to do this in a year. And it took 3, which again, pandemic, lots of companies, complicated use cases. So what time frame are y'all looking at for here?
It's a great question. And right now it's a bit early days to start. At this stage, what we're really all about is awareness building and inviting others to come to the table. Now is a perfect time if you are involved in the health and wellness space, if you're involved in, health and wellness devices, be it at-home products or products that might be kind of crossover products between home healthcare and medical. If you're involved in that value chain, now is the time to reach out to us and come join. You can help shape the use cases. You can help shape the trajectory of the working group. You can help shape the timeline. So now is the time to come to the table and to join us. And I'm confident that as we talk more, Stacey, I'll have more to say about timelines.
Okay. And again on time, why are y'all doing this now? Because I'm old. I've covered technology. I remember sitting and watching a presentation like 2005 with Intel talking about like home healthcare and aging in place. And then, we even saw very cool things like HealthKit get launched, and no one really uses, or doctors, sorry, the health industry doesn't really use that. So why is now the time to kind of bring this together?
Also, another good question. And yes, timing is everything. I do think I am older than you, however. I will not share that information. That would be part of my not consent. But
no transparency on that.
No
okay.
Transparency from me. Sorry. But you're right. I think things have changed, right? You mentioned the pandemic as relates to Matter. I'll mention it as relates to health and wellness. It is now more normal to have consumers securing healthcare services at home. It's more normal for physicians and insurance providers and payers to allow for that to happen. So we're in an environment now where this is simply becoming more natural. I think the second factor is, particularly as we think about the Alliance, we have a broad group of companies together today. we've been able to show some success bringing parties together and getting something like Matter out the door. We've kind of proven that community methodology. And now it's time to apply that methodology with this ecosystem and community model to a new place. So we think the time is now, and we think that by getting started today and creating this call to action and call to join, we will see the right people come to the table, and we'll be bringing things out relative to standards, the specifications, the certification program, and alignment with those regulatory groups that kind of meet the market where it needs to be.
The CSA has Zigbee. They have Matter. There's now this health and wellness working group. Do you foresee the creation of other groups? Like, I know energy management is a huge opportunity for a bunch of people to get together and create standards as well. Are there other areas where y'all are going to focus?
The short answer is yes, I do believe so. And in fact, there's a couple of working groups that we have today that are currently operational in addition to the ones that you mentioned. So we have our access control working group that's focusing on
the lock one.
That's right. Some of the fundamental issues and fragmentation in access control and access management. We have the product security working group. That group is focused on trying to address the broad fragmentation of security requirements and security standards within the regulatory environment around the world. We have our data model working group. This is the group that builds some of the foundational device cluster and technical elements of the devices that are part of both Zigbee and Matter. And I do think, I alluded to it a little bit earlier. I think you can kind of be on the lookout for things in the privacy space. That's obviously front and center for everyone. And as always, we are super open to our members coming to us and saying, this is an area we want to explore. Here is the case. This is the case for a working group. This is the case for change. And that's what's just pretty cool about being part of the CSA, being part of the Alliance.
What parties are already involved in the health and wellness working group?
So we do have a number of our current member companies today, both our board companies and our participants. And I do want to give a quick shout out to the Center for Medical Interoperability. They are one of the founding members of this working group. C4MI is also an industry nonprofit, but focused a little bit more on the payer and hospital and medical side of the equation.
Can you mention any of the other people who are involved in addition to them?
So right now, we're still at our very formative stages. So we're not sharing broadly all of the working group company members.
All right, Michelle, thank you so much for coming on the show this week. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and to your audience. Appreciate it.
And that concludes this week's episode of the Internet of Things podcast. Please join us next Thursday and don't forget to subscribe. And if you can't get enough IoT news, I would love for you to sign up at www.stacyoniot.com for our weekly IoT newsletter, where we explain all kinds of things that we don't even get to on the show. Once again, thank you for listening and please subscribe.